What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the global recession. Yes, it's somewhere the US recession, the European recession, the Chinese recession. I think the dominoes have fallen and the whole world is going through a recession and all the evidence is there. But now, what does this mean? How did this happen? What should we be doing next? All the questions, don't worry. Watch this whole video throughout. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment as well, because I'll be explaining that all in today's video. So first off, let's talk about what's going on in China, because China might be one of the biggest messes out there. Everything from the real estate being a huge Ponzi scheme, the Chinese government hurting its own people, and even the weather being up against them, which is nobody's actually talking about this. But China has experienced one of the biggest, if not the biggest, heat wave in history. It's had over 70 days where the average temperature was over 100 degrees. Now, because of this has destroyed many crops. It has absolutely dried up over 66 of the rivers, including the biggest river and the third biggest in the whole world, and it's also shut down a lot of factories for extended period of times because of the weather was so insanely high they couldn't even go to work. Now this has just added an extra factor on what's been hurting the Chinese economy. The imports and exports have both been slowed down, and kind of the time where China was this huge growing country seems to not be the case anymore. They're going to be falling short of their quarterly GDP growth, which is typically of an average of 5.5%. They'll be slowing down to break even to potentially the negative GDP, which for China is actually a huge blow, as they were on a huge rise on how quickly they were growing every single year. The reason for China to have this huge decline has been their zero COVID policy, so their people can't really go out and spend as much as they were able to. It has been the fact that the weather has completely destroyed them as well, and their real estate kind of been crashing. I mean, we all saw in those videos of them destroying their own buildings that they had just built. The reason was that all this real estate, a lot of the promises, a lot of the money that was put into this company for them to build certain things for the Chinese people was lied to, and they were in a huge hole, and a lot of them have actually defaulted and filed for bankruptcy. There's been over 20 companies, real estate companies in China, that have filed for bankruptcy that were very, very major. Evergrande, of course, being one of the biggest ones that we all saw months ago, having to file for bankruptcy and being billions of dollars in the hole. Now, all eyes are going to be on the Chinese government. What are they going to do to fight this off? Are they going to be bailing out all these companies? Are they going to be bailing out the banks? Are they going to be helping the people? The last thing that we saw was that they had tanks in front of a bank that wouldn't let people take out their cash. In my personal opinion, I think China will more than likely be experiencing a short-term recession. Now, I don't think they're going to have a huge depression or a huge recession. The reason being just how their government is run. Their government is not a democracy. Their government is not capitalism. So more than likely, I think they're going to have a recession. Then China's probably going to be spending a ton of money, because they do have a ton of money in the reserve, which is probably going to boost up their economy again to kind of get back to where they were before. And I don't think they're going to go through a huge depression like we saw back in 2008, just because of how their government is and how much they control their government out there. I just don't see how it's going to be the same exact thing as we saw. So I don't expect a huge depression for them, but I do expect them a short-term recession, which should be anywhere from 1 to 3 years. On top of that, we saw both the imports and exports being slowed down in China, and we currently saw some pretty big news last week with NVIDIA AI chips not being able to ship all those AI chips to China. They're claiming it's for military purposes. And while we're on the military subject, we all know what happened in Taiwan with Nancy Pelosi going to Taiwan, of course, pissing off China. I just had to add more fuel to that fire. We saw the House trying to approve a $1.1 billion military budget bill to donate to Taiwan. And my question is this: what are they going to do with the $1.1 billion? Like, you think $1.1 million is going to be a difference if China takes them over or not because there was a war? I'm sorry, that's not going to do anything. What are they going to build? A fence? Like, there's nothing much they can build, but all it did was piss off China even more, because that's just what we need right now, piss off China even more. And they even say that if this bill passes, they're going to have countermeasures against the US. Now, that can be anything. That could be that maybe they add sanctions, which of course will hurt the US a lot more than we hurt China, just because how many things we take from China. So we import a lot more from China than they import from us, and we depend on them a lot more than they depend on us. So ultimately, that will probably hurt inflation in America, making prices of things go higher, with a lot of electrical products, wheat, their biggest exporter of wheat, and many other things. And not only that, China does hold $1 trillion of US treasury. So if they ever need to sell certain things because they need to stimulate their own economy, that could also affect our markets if they decide to dump all that money into our bond markets. Now, this takes us to kind of the other side of the world. Let's go back to Europe. What's going on in Europe? Europe has been just as a mess as China, if not worse. Inflation hitting double-digit numbers in certain European nations. We saw Germany as high as 8 to 9%. Italy not doing as well, my home country. And of course, the biggest reason why they're seeing extreme high of inflation is the energy crisis. They're going through a huge energy crisis, which has been both a combination of the Russian-Ukraine war and them saying they're not going to import any more energy from Russia, and a mixture of them trying to go green, and now those nuclear plants is shut down, seem to be like, hey, we actually really needed that right now, and some of the prices of the energy has been insane. If we look at the price of energy in Germany, it makes this looks like it's Shiba Inu or Dogecoin. Of course, that has hurt the economy. Europe is going through a very similar recession, just like we're seeing in China, just like we're seeing in America. So we are seeing high levels of inflation. We saw 2 negative GDP reports, which confirms we're currently in a recession. And what's super interesting is that the US, since 1955, has always seen a recession if the unemployment number was under 5%, which currently it is, and inflation was about 5%. So what does that tell you? Currently we have high inflations of 8 to 9%. We'll see end of September when the CPI data comes out what that's going to be like if we're still extremely high. And unemployment is currently under the 5% number. But what does that tell us? That tells us actually that a recession is more than likely, if not it's already happening, it's around the corner. Because anytime there's been low amount of unemployment and near all-time lows, that was always followed by a recession. So we can see that pretty much all the major superpowers in Asia, in Europe, in America are going through a depression and a recession. Well, what should you be doing? Well, this is just another cycle of macroeconomics. It's understanding that whenever things go really high up, more than likely they're going to be coming down soon. So my plan is still the same. Find the right deals, find the right stock, keep dollar cost averaging into a high conviction place, keeping most of my portfolio in the S&P 500 and high safe ETFs, waiting for that bounce back and then invest more aggressively into growth. But I'm still dollar cost averaging. I'm still keeping cash on the side for the sweet deals once, prices kind of get to the bottom out and I can find a good ROI reward when it comes down to real estate. And keeping my investment portfolio just structured how it is. The best time to invest is during a recession. So I'm extremely happy that I'm actually investing in a recession for almost the first time in my life. I came to America when it was 2008, so I never got this opportunity. Well, actually I did. I lied. My parents did. My parents moved to America during 2008. They were able to buy their first house, and a lot of that was because the market was really down at the time. If they came in during 2021, I promise you they wouldn't have been able to afford a house. I'm very excited to finally be taking advantage of some really great deals that are coming around the corner. I think we should all be excited. As much as it sucks, we have to understand that this is just part of macroeconomics. This is how the cycles work. We have a depression, we have a recession. You have a cooling off period because we need to rest before we go move even higher. You can't just keep going higher forever. At a certain point, the economy needs to cool off and wait a little bit till it finds the next leg of growth. So that's all for today's video. Let me know in the comments below, what are you investing and what is your plan during this global recession? And I've upgraded it. It's no more the US recession. It's global. It's China. It's Europe. South America. And when you have a global recession, of course, whenever the main superpowers are going through it, the minor powers, like you go to Latin America, if you go to South America, you go to Africa, you go to all these other countries, they're going to be suffering as much. Just like we see in Europe, one of the weakest countries, Turkey, experiencing extremely high inflation. And as always, peace.